Do you ever feel like you're chasing a ghost? That mythical state of perfect work life balance. I used to spend years chasing this ideology of work life balance. I used to sit at my desk late in the evenings, completely drowning in half finished tasks and unread emails, things I'd promised myself I'd do, things people were waiting on me for, while my phone was buzzing with messages from people I cared about, friends, family. And I'll just sit there and ask myself, is this it? Is this really what making it is supposed to feel like? Is this what the path to success really looks like? At some point, it felt like I was losing on every front. But the truth is, you never actually win. When I was working at sometimes feel guilty for not being present at home with loved ones, of course, especially when there's something important that needs my presence. And when I finally shut down to be with my family, I usually felt guilty that I wasn't out there hustling and building my dream. And it feels like I'm not moving forward. Well, I'm sure many of you can relate. It's a constant cycle of feeling like you're falling behind somewhere. And if you're like a lot of us building a career, working on a side project, perhaps with family obligations, and maybe people back home who depend really on you too, the guilt doesn't just end at two things, it multiplies. Every role that you fit yourself into feels like it's competing for the same 24 hours. Welcome back to Future Foundations. Now, I think most of you are probably familiar with the concept or with the phrase work life balance. I put that in quotes. But today, I'd like us to take that concept of balance, and throw it away into the bin. Then we can replace it with something, a word which I think is more sustainable: integration. I want to talk about your relationship with your work, your time, and your output. And more specifically, I want to talk about the shift from a worker mindset where you're desperately trying to keep the scales from tipping over to an owner mindset where everything in your life actually moves in the same direction. Now, to be real, I think the word balance is a trap. It's not just a bad goal, but it's a mechanic that sets you up to fail. If you win at work, your life loses. If you win at life, your ambition loses. That's a zero-sum game. The very word balance implies a scale, and by its very nature, a scale operates on trade-offs. On a standard scale, for one side to go up, the other side must come down. So the moment you invest more time in your work, your personal life feels the deficit and registers it as a loss. Likewise, the moment you decide to breathe or to take some time off to rest, your ambition views that rest as a retreat and registers it as a setback. This kind of dynamic creates an internal war where your drive for success clashes with your need for peace. In such an environment, your energy, your attention, and your growth becomes enemies to each other, and you find yourself caught in a loop where every decision feels like a mistake. No matter what you do, no matter your choices, you're always wrong. I recall listening to an entrepreneur some time ago where he rejects the idea of balance in favor of integration. And this entrepreneur shared a story of how his father would put in 80 hours, 80-hour work weeks, but maintained control by choosing exactly where he puts those 80 hours. Now, while many people might imagine integration as a perfect 50 to 50 division, the reality of the 999-day war, which I spoke some time ago about, requires you to build something significant, which makes such a split, a 50-50 split, very impossible. Now, here's what I've come to understand. The goal was never to have balance. The goal was always sovereignty, having the power to decide exactly how your energy is spent. There's a huge difference between working 60 hours because you're chained to a desk and working 60 hours because you choose those specific hours to build something you love. One is a prison and the other is a choice. As a builder, I want you to stop asking yourself, how do I protect the little time I have? And instead start asking, how do I create more of it? Those are completely different questions and they lead to completely different lives. But before you can do that, you have to write down your terms and conditions. Now, what does that mean? It means deciding what actually matters to you before you choose the vehicle in which you use to get there. Most people accept a job or start a business without defining their life first. They build the machine and then they try to fit their soul into the gears. Wrong. You have to think about what your negotiables could be. Maybe your terms are that your mornings belong to you, so you don't need a morning rise alarm. Or maybe it's that you don't want to be bound by someone else's schedule, and that means owning your own life. Maybe it's that you want your weekends to actually feel like weekends. Whatever they are, you define your terms first. You define the terms you want to live your life on, and then you build the specific conditions around those terms and pick the right vehicles, the career or the business, to make those terms very real, to make your life real. Because if you don't design your lifestyle before you build your business, or before you accept a demanding offer, or before you take on that new commitment, you definitely end up building something that looks like success from the outside, but it feels like a prison from the inside. I'd like you to understand that integration starts with intention. You can't blend what you have not yet defined. So here's where we are going to hit the roadblock. Why is role conflict so exhausting in the first place? Why do we feel so torn? Why does it feel like you're always being pulled in 5 different directions at once? I think the answer probably is because of how you relate to your work. Right now, you're probably the primary asset generating everything in your life. Let me explain what this means. In the traditional model, everything depends on you physically showing up. You're trading your hours for dollars and doing everything by yourself. Apparently, the biggest flaw here is that a job is just a short-term solution to a long-term problem. Because not long after you're gone, say you take a break, whether due to burnout or an illness, a family emergency, or just needing a real break, your progress also stops. You still need money, but then your income is frozen, your projects come to a halt, and everything else waits for you to come back. If you're self-employed, for example, most likely you're the only person who can do the sales or execute the kind of tasks that exist in your business. In fact, you don't really have a business. You are simply just the highest paid employee in that activity. So by the time you step away, maybe to go to your child's recital or to take a vacation, your income also stops that very minute. And when you're that person, when you're the one that everything depends on, every role you currently sit on becomes a threat to every other role. Time with your family is time away from your business. Time with your side project is time away from your job. Time resting is time you're falling behind. The blame here is not time management exactly. That's a structural problem. You see, we've been raised on the idea that hard work is the ultimate virtue. Work hard enough, long enough, and you'll make it. And of course, when you try talking to people who look successful, they'll definitely tell you something like, you need to work hard. Well, hard work matters. It absolutely matters. But hard work is only the entry fee, and it's never the destination. The people who build things that last don't just work harder, they work differently. You need to understand the difference. How different do they do these things? They build structures that carry weight even when they step back. If you are only relying on raw willpower and motivation every morning to keep your life moving, that's not sustainable. You're going to burn out. Willpower is a finite resource. Energy runs out, but systems remain infinite. To escape the trap of being the asset, we have to talk about the structural flip. In the previous conversation, we discussed governing yourself as the CEO of your life. Now we need to treat your finances the same way. Think of yourself or your household as a business. When you have a worker's mindset, the flow is simple. You work, you earn, taxes are taken out, you survive on what's left. You're trading your life for a shrinking pile of cash. And this is what Robert Kiyosaki tries to explain when he talks about the wealth quadrants. Now, when you flip to an ownership mindset, the equation changes. You earn income, you reinvest in your own growth and systems first, then you deal with whatever remains. You stop asking, how much did I make? And now you start asking, how much did I build? That's the ownership mindset. That's the builder's mindset. Your goal at whatever scale you're currently at is the same. Build something that doesn't collapse when you take enough. Now, here's where it gets a bit tricky, because the moment you start talking about building systems and stepping back, most ambitious people usually hit a wall. I've seen so many builders and entrepreneurs who believe that nobody actually can do what they do exactly the way they do it or better than they do it. And I understand this feeling completely. When you care very deeply about something you built from nothing, and you have your name on the door, the idea of handing any part of it to someone else feels like a risk that you can't afford to take. But have you thought about what that mindset is actually costing you? It's costing you your own growth. Holding on to every task doesn't make you more effective. It makes you the bottleneck, and a bottleneck is just another word for a prison. So when you're the bottleneck, the whole thing is capped at whatever you alone can do in a day. That's not leverage. That's a very, very stressful job, and that's a job you created for yourself. You need systems. Real leadership, whether you're leading a team, a project, or even just your own systems, it's never about being the smartest person doing all the work. It's about empowering others to do it and to do it well. Instead of you just throwing tasks at people and hoping they figure it out, you go first. You show them how, you guide the process, you build the system, and then you let them go next. You're giving them the structure and not just the assignment. The people helping you are a reflection of how well you've led them. If things keep going wrong when you delegate, the honest question you should be asking yourself should be if you actually set them up to succeed, instead of asking them, why can't they do it right? And this applies even if you're building solo right now. Delegation doesn't only mean hiring people. It's about automation, systematizing, removing yourself as the single point of failure in your own life. Let me ask you something, if I may. How many goals have you set this year that you haven't moved on yet? If you're constantly working but not moving forward, it's most likely a systems problem. We usually have this obsession with goals, but goals are only good for direction. They tell you where you want to go, but they don't necessarily move you forward. Systems do. Systems are what actually make the progress day after day, whether you feel like it or not. There's a powerful principle I live by. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the strength of your systems. Now, when people hear the word system, they may be thinking about spreadsheets and flowcharts and complicated processes. But a system is just a decision you make once so that you don't have to spend valuable time and, of course, mental energy on it every single day. Good process alone is what drives good success, good results. So like I always say, meal prepping is a system. Blocking that time for deep work or to focus on your side project is a system. Automating your savings and general finances so that money moves before you even start spending, that's a system. Each one of these is a decision you stop having to make repeatedly, and every decision you remove from your daily mental load frees up energy for actual creative leadership. You eventually stop being the machine and you start building those machines. When that happens, you work and your life stops fighting. They start compounding. Your personal disciplines make you better at your job. Your job skills fuel your side business. Your side business teaches you how to structure your life. Nothing is competing. Everything is simply reinforcing. Remember that rich people don't sell their time to save money. They invest to get their time back. And for the people who never seem to get ahead, it's really about effort. It's more about structure. Work-life balance is a myth that keeps you feeling guilty. Integration is what actually works. That's the reality of a builder. When you start treating your life like an entity, when you set your terms and conditions first, when you build systems that work for you even in the dark, everything changes. You work, your side projects, your relationships, your rest, they stop competing and they start pointing at the same thing. You're not managing a schedule anymore, but then you're living a designed life. Now, I want to challenge you this week. First of all, I'd like you to write your terms and conditions. What are the 3 non-negotiables for how you want to live your life? Reflect carefully and write them down before you even proceed on execution. Then secondly, identify your bottleneck. Where in your life are you the only one holding things together? Hopefully in our next episode, we'll go from the why to the how. Stop trying to balance the scale and start owning the systems. This is Future Foundations. Take one real action today, and I'll see you in the next conversation.